I didn't plan to live past that night. I walked into the river with my skirts dragging heavy, and I remember thinking no one would even look for me. The current was colder than I expected. My breath caught, not from fear, but from the weight that had been pressing me for months. The moon hung pale above the cedar trees, and the town's lanterns were nothing but distant flickers behind me. My father's words, "You've shamed us all," still rang in my ears. I let the water climb to my waist, then my chest. My shoes slipped on the stones. For a moment I thought it would be easy just to let go, to let the current decide for me. But the sound of hooves shattered the silence. I turned my head, startled, and water filled my mouth. I coughed, stumbled, and before I could sink, rough hands caught my arm and pulled me hard toward the shore. I collapsed on the wet ground, coughing river water, my hair plastered across my face. My lungs burned, but I forced air back in. When I looked up, he was there, broad shoulders, soaked shirt, breath steaming in the night air. His face was lined, but not cruel. His eyes held something I hadn't seen in years. Concern. "Don't do that again," he said, quiet but firm. His hand didn't leave my arm. It was as if he thought I might leap back into the water if he let go. I tried to pull free, shame burning through me hotter than the cold river. "You don't understand," I whispered, trembling all over. "It's over for me. I don't need to understand." His voice was low, steady. Then he paused, watching me like he was weighing something only he could see. Finally he said, "You're my wife now." The words stunned me more than the river's cold. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. I didn't know his name. I didn't know why he'd say such a thing. But he meant it. His grip was steady, his eyes unblinking. Behind us, the water kept rushing past, carrying away everything I thought I was. For the first time that night, I felt something other than despair. I felt confusion, even a spark of fear, but also the faintest thread of hope. I hadn't chosen to be pulled from the river. But now I had to choose what to do with the man who claimed me in silence. And the night wasn't done with either of us yet. By morning, I expected him to leave me by the riverbank, but he didn't. Instead, the stranger lifted me onto his horse without a word and led me through the gray dawn. The town was waking, shutters creaking open, boots scraping against the boardwalks. People stared. I heard it in their whispers. "That's Judge Callahan's girl. She was seen in the river, with him." Their eyes cut through me sharper than the water ever had. I lowered my head, wishing I could vanish into the saddle. My father's house stood tall at the edge of town, shutters tight, the porch swept neat. I slid down, legs shaking, and walked to the door. My knuckles barely touched the wood when it opened. My father stood there, jaw set, eyes cold as stone. "You don't live here anymore," he said. No hesitation. No trace of the man who once tucked me into bed. Then he shut the door in my face. The sound hollowed me out. I stood there for a breath, two, then turned back toward the horse. The stranger, Caleb, I finally heard someone mutter his name, watched without a word. His expression gave nothing away, but he held out his hand. For the second time in less than a day, I took it, because I had nowhere else to go. He led me past the gossiping crowd, up the ridge road, into a silence that wrapped tighter the farther we rode. His cabin sat on a rise above the river. Plain walls, a small corral, smoke curling weak from the chimney. It wasn't much, but it was more than I had. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and old fire. He set down a bowl of stew and pushed it across the table. I hadn't eaten since the day before, but my hands trembled too much to lift the spoon. Caleb sat across from me, watching the fire instead of my face. The silence between us stretched, heavy but not cruel. When I finally spoke, my voice cracked. "Why did you say that? About me being your wife?" He didn't look away from the flames. "It's the only way they'll leave you be." The words should have stung, but they didn't. They settled into me like something half true, half promise. I didn't know what to call it yet. That night, as the fire dimmed and I lay on a blanket by the hearth, voices rose outside. Male voices rough with anger. "She doesn't belong to you, Caleb. We know who she belongs to." Boots scraped against the porch. Fists struck the door. I sat up, heart pounding as Caleb rose slow and steady, pulling the rifle from above the mantel. He glanced at me once, his eyes dark, then toward the door as the pounding grew louder. The river had nearly taken me the night before. Now the town was at the door, ready to finish what the water could not. The pounding on the door lasted longer than I thought it would. Caleb stood firm, rifle in hand, body still as a post. He didn't shout back, didn't curse, just waited. After a while, the voices outside broke into laughter, cruel, taunting, and then the sound of boots faded into the night. The silence that followed pressed heavier than their threats. Caleb slid the rifle back into its place above the mantel, then settled by the fire as if nothing had happened. I sat frozen on the blanket, my heart refusing to calm. "They'll be back," I whispered. He nodded once. "They usually are." The fire cracked, throwing shadows across the rough-hewn walls. I gathered my shawl tighter, feeling the damp still clinging to me from the river. He glanced at me then, not unkindly, just studying. The weight of it made me speak words I had kept buried. "I'm not pregnant," I said suddenly. My voice shook, but I forced the truth out. "That's what they tell everyone, that I shamed my family, that I sinned. But it's not true. My father wanted to be rid of me, and this was his excuse." I never had a chance to defend myself. The fire hissed as a log shifted. Caleb leaned back, arms resting on his knees. His face didn't change, but his silence wasn't judgment. It was something else, like he was waiting. "I thought drowning would be easier than walking through their stairs every day," I added, barely above a whisper. My throat ached, and I pressed a hand to it, ashamed of how small I sounded. Caleb finally spoke. "My wife died in childbirth." His voice was low, almost lost under the fire's crackle. "She never got to hold the baby." "Neither did I. Buried them both the same day." The words fell heavy between us. I looked at him, but his eyes were fixed on the flames. His hands were steady, though the muscles in his jaw worked hard. We sat there in that silence, his grief, my shame, braided together in the glow of the fire. For the first time in years, I felt like someone had shown me a piece of themselves, raw and unguarded. Then the sound came again. Boots outside, more this time. Voices rising, harsher. "She belongs to the town. You can't keep her, Caleb." I froze, breath caught in my chest. Caleb stood, the rifle already back in his hands. He didn't look at me, but his voice was steady. "Stay behind me." The firelight flickered across his face, shadows sharp against the lines of it. And I realized the danger wasn't just at the door, it was in what would happen if the town forced him to choose. The storm rolled in just before dusk. Heavy clouds pressed low over the ridge, and the smell of rain crept through the cracks in Caleb's cabin. I stood by the small window, watching lightning stretch across the hills. Behind the thunder, I caught something darker, the sound of horses, many of them, climbing the trail. Caleb was already at the table, cleaning his rifle with slow, practiced movements. He didn't look at me when he spoke. "They're coming," my stomach turned. I thought of my father's face when he closed the door on me, the way the townsfolk whispered in the street. None of them had come to protect me, not once. But they would come to claim me, as if I were property. By the time the first fist struck the cabin door, the rain was falling in sheets. Voices shouted over the storm, "Give her up, Caleb." "She belongs here, not with you." Another voice cut sharper, "We won't leave without her." I stepped back, fear rising up my throat, but Caleb moved forward, steady as stone. He opened the door, not wide, just enough for the storm's wind to push inside. Lightning lit the crowd. A dozen men stood there, rifles slung, faces wet with rain and anger. My father stood among them, his eyes cold, arms folded like he was delivering justice. "She's my daughter," he shouted, "and she'll pay for what she's done." Something inside me snapped. I shoved past Caleb, the rain soaking me instantly. My voice rose louder than I thought it could. "I'm not carrying a child. You all know it, but it suits you to keep the lie alive." The men shifted, uneasy. My father's jaw tightened, but I didn't stop. "You threw me away. You shut your doors. You left me for dead. You don't own me anymore." For a moment, all I heard was the storm. Caleb stepped onto the porch beside me, rifle across his chest. He didn't need to say a word. The weight of him standing there was enough. Lightning flashed, thunder cracked, and the crowd seemed to shrink back under it. One by one, the men lowered their eyes. My father lingered the longest, his stare cutting into me, but even he turned his horse after the others began to retreat. Soon only the rain remained, pounding the earth, washing the dust from the ridge. I stood trembling, water dripping from my hair into my eyes. Caleb didn't touch me, didn't pull me back inside. He just stood close enough that I could feel his steadiness in the storm, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt like I had fought to breathe, and won. By morning, the storm had passed. The hills lay quiet under a thin mist, every branch dripping silver in the pale dawn. I stepped outside, my bare feet sinking into the damp earth. The air smelled of cedar and rain, and for the first time in months, I could fill my lungs without choking on shame. Behind me, the cabin door creaked. Caleb came out carrying a small wooden box. He looked tired, but his eyes were calm. Without a word, he opened the lid and pulled out a simple ring, rough, carved from cedar. He turned it in his fingers before placing it in my palm. "It was my mother's," he said. "She wore it after the metal band wore thin. It isn't worth anything to the world, but it kept her steady." The wood felt warm, even in the morning chill. My throat tightened. No one had ever given me something that carried more than its weight. My father had given me harsh words. The town had given me stares. But Caleb was offering something different, something that didn't need to be explained. "I don't know if I can be what you think I am," I whispered, staring at the ring. He shook his head. "I don't think anything. I just know I don't want to lose you to the river again." The words were plain, but they settled deep, steadier than any promise I had ever heard. My hand trembled as I slipped the cedar ring onto my finger. It fit, snug and certain. For a long while we stood in silence. Not the heavy silence of fear or judgment, but something new. Something that allowed breath and space and the chance of tomorrow. Down the ridge the town still waited, with its gossip and cruel eyes. They hadn't disappeared. My father's anger hadn't vanished. But standing there, I realized they no longer owned the path I walked. I turned toward the river. The same waters that had nearly swallowed me now gleamed in the morning light. It wasn't an ending anymore. It was proof that I had been pulled out, and that I was still here. Caleb touched the brim of his hat, glancing at me once, then toward the horizon. "We've got work to do," he said, voice steady. I nodded, brushing the wet hair from my face. The storm had left the land fresh, and for the first time, I felt the same inside my chest. I wasn't the girl who had walked into the river. I was the woman who had been pulled back out and chosen to live.